A really important part is looking at who they are and what this audience that we've studied is. And so what we've done is we've linked Scylla up with Watson's personality assessments. And what we're doing is looking at the Big Five personality model. And basically, we've assembled an audience of 128,000 people to look at here. And that audience is a virtual panel. We don't necessarily even know that we're observing them. It's all anonymized. We're not necessarily aware of who's doing exactly what, of course, but what we're able to do is group them together and really look at their patterns of behavior and what's driving them during Ramadan, because personality does change over time. There's a lot of theories around saying that, someone's personality is fixed once they're an adult, but of course, life stages, circumstances, lots of stuff changes. And so what we thought was really interesting is looking at this audience. And what we can do when we look at this audience is understand basically their emotions. So in this case, we've got people that are really compassionate. They're high tendency to be compassionate, cooperative towards others. They're open to experiencing new activities. Their emotions are sensitive to the environment around them. So different posts can make them upset. So news particularly, so a period of bad news, and we had that very close to Ramadan this time. I think it was just after we had, the issues in Palestine, for example, but any kind of bad news is going to affect this audience. And so if bad news is coming, or rumor is coming for your brand, then crisis comms are obviously really, really important. They are anyway, but this, for our audience that perhaps is interested in an FMCG, which is almost everybody, we didn't segment this further into those that are interested in travel and things like that, then it's really important to react in a really positive way to all that sort of thing and not be negative through that. And also the people are slightly unorganized, which aren't we all? And so what we also get is some interesting data on needs. The needs are really the high-level aspects of a product that are likely to resonate with the person who's giving us their insights, so their opinions. Those opinions are collected primarily, we believe, the strongest platform is Twitter to do that type of a thing. It really gives us a really deep insight into how we do that. And with this audience, we can see that that audience really looks for products that reflect growth and discovery for themselves. So for instance, if we're talking about cooking, that could be new cuisines, trying new approaches to traditional methods. They also like brands that demonstrate a willingness to go out and get it, and, really go out and seize the day, I guess, and are upbeat. And that's a really important part. That's sort of getting into 65% strength. These are, I'm only showing you the positive, but one negative trait. While they prefer a strong identity and like to see themselves reflected in it of the brand. So the brand should have a very strong identity, not just talking about logos and things here, obviously brand purpose and things like that, whether you believe in that or not. The consumer likes to see basically following through on things, and they favor sensible, tried and tested brands. So trust is a really important part as well. And they don't necessarily need to think that a brand reflects them at home or their personal life. It's not necessarily driven by that. It's driven by the other things that I talked about. Their values, for instance, so that audience in Ramadan that we looked at, their values are really the motivating factors within that person's decision making. So what do they look for? The decision making is affected by, they show concern of others. So we might be able to infer, well, we can infer from that they are likely to be parents or otherwise in a significant family environment. We also understand they have a need to emphasize independent action, thoughts and feelings, as well as readiness for new experiences. They don't like being dictated to. So think about that in the messaging and prefer a choice. So it could be something that, when you're thinking about brands and MPD and SKUs or otherwise, if we're talking about something as broad as travel, for example, then it's thinking about how do we give these people where they feel like they're making great choices. And they're not necessarily bound to loyalty, which is very interesting, but they do also not really have a resistance to change. They're open to these new experiences. A really interesting part here is the preferences that we can get as indicators. So what we can see here is that this audience is largely driven by spur-of-the-moment decisions. Social media influences them a lot, which you might expect because these people are on social media. So there is a sort of an element of bias there that you can take into account. And also product utility is more important, for instance, than sort of luxury or things like that to that audience. Family members don't necessarily influence their their value, their decisions. But we also see as well is a big increase. I don't have the comparison data in this chart. The second line is 49% credit card payment. That's how likely someone is to be a user of e-commerce. That's significantly increased between data sets and shows personality changes. Why I'm telling you this, I think this chart really gives you a good idea, is that not that many people, for example, so if I asked you as an audience, are you concerned about the environment, you're likely to tell me yes, I would hope anyway. And that's because you would think that I have an expectation to hear yes, but in actual fact, perhaps your habits and behaviours don't necessarily reflect that. And so if environmental change is sort of high on the agenda, then what we need to do is really come at people with a message to get them interested and get them acting. And this is the difference between asking somebody what they do and observing what they do and how they do it. And these preferences really give us a strong idea. So like, for instance, there's a strong desire to eat out, strong entrepreneurial spirit, which gives us an idea into how these people think and feel. But this chart I just included because I thought it was really interesting to see people's behavior, patterns of behavior in what they do and what they follow, what they share, aren't necessarily aligned to potentially what they tell us. And so layering that information and creating briefs is strong. And then once we do that, we should understand their affinities. This audience has a strong affinity to a certain set of brands. What we see is a really strong, very different set of brands. We'll share these so you can look through them after the presentation, but basically a mix of everyday, a bit of luxury, a bit of self-improvement, and also inspiration for what they do. And these affinities are measured by the total audience that we looked at, which is huge, and looking at how many of the same people follow the same accounts. And then once they do that, then we're able to determine how much of an affinity that particular audience has with this particular product. And that's something that we can look through. So you can look through yourself a bit more. So basically, if we look at this Ramadan audience, what we're seeing is this focus on empathy. The consumer has this really high empathy score. What we really need to do is they understand that they're basing decisions on their ability to try new things and their personal growth, and understanding and being at the same level of them is really important. If we overlay that with that positive mood that we talked about and the patternistic behavior coming through on social, then we're seeing that the rest of 2021 is probably going to be quite strong for people wanting to be active out there, not necessarily active in the sense of running around the block, but being a part of society. And that introversion, I think, the numbers point to that introversion actually ebbing away, people becoming more comfortable again with what they see their life as. Decisions are going to be swift, so we know from the personality insights that particular audience, so we're talking a mix here of Saudi, we've split these as well in a much more detailed way, but Saudi and UAE, for instance, they like to make a quick decision when it's product related. Maybe that's not necessarily the same for big ticket items like auto or travel or things like that, but on everyday items, there is a high spur of the moment score for them. And if we incorporate sort of social proof, that's really important into products or brands, and that can not necessarily just means not letting them feel like they're alone, because there's an empathy to everyone around them. And obviously platform choice just then really strips back to what are your objectives. That's it. That's all you need to think about, and go back to that strategy of going, okay, who's the audience, what we're going to do, and how we're going to reach those. And if the audience is everybody, then it's like, what's our end result? And then obviously there's a strong need to be in the moment with them. So it's really about their connection to others, strategies to engage and be collaborative. And then obviously brands that really succeed in this, and knowing that the audience is modern, the audience has evolved from a traditional to a modern audience, it will have an outsized impact.